Welcome back everyone to the video, and today we are talking about Anthony Richardson going into year 2 and what the Colts offense is looking like as of right now. I'm going to form this video exactly how I formed the previous videos on Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow and the Bengals and Bryce Young. All those, if you guys haven't seen them, go check those out. They're going to be very, very similar to this one, as I'm going to keep this series ongoing. I'm going to try and get to every single team once. Even if I don't happen to hit every team once, I am doing an off-season series where it's going to be a very in-depth look at each team. We're going to grade some players, look at the schedule, give a whole kind of season breakdown, then kind of predict where they fall for the season. That'll be more in-depth, and that will definitely be, each team will get a video on that. So if I happen to not get to a team with like a huge off-season storyline with this series, I will definitely get to every team doing that. So I promise your favorite team will be covered at some point in this off-season. For today, though, to understand Anthony Richardson going into next season, we need to look at some of the talent around him, including A.D. Mitchell from this past draft, who kind of fell a little bit. It was a little surprising. His profile was graded as a 6.35, and as with the other videos I've done, we're going to go down to his strengths and weaknesses as far as his draft profile goes, talk about these pretty briefly, and then get into the rest of the Colts offense and look at that. So I'm not going to highlight every single strength and weakness. If you like to read over them yourself, feel free to pause the video and read them. I'm going to highlight just a few from each category. For strengths, I like to highlight Flash's foot quickness needed to beat NFL press. I think the Colts definitely need somebody like that. Michael Pittman's kind of like a do-it-all guy. I wouldn't necessarily say he's like a press beater by any means, or like incredibly fast. Same really goes for like Alec Pierce, who's in there last year. I think Josh Downs is a bit better at that, but I think A.D. Mitchell is very good at that. He also was able to break tackles and fall forward for positive yards after a catch, patient long ball tracker, and noted jump ball winner. So this guy can do a little bit of everything. He's very, very athletic, and we'll get to that next in just a second here. For his weaknesses, though, and this is kind of, I think, why he tended to kind of fall in the draft. Intensity can fluctuate from game to game, and I cannot find where the other one was. Doesn't play with aggression or sustain when asked to run block. I know the reason, or at least one of the reasons he fell, was kind of like the questions around his character and like intensity in games when he isn't getting the ball, which I understand is obviously, that is always something you want to look for. You want guys that are excited to be there and give, full effort every single play. For Mitchell, though, and with really any player that have weaknesses similar to this, I tend to kind of wait that out a little bit and see how big it really is when he's actually in the NFL. I understand it is obviously something that scouts do like to grade and weigh into the prospect, and it does matter to NFL teams. But I'm going to just kind of brush that aside a bit for right now, and I'm going to give a chance and just kind of see what he kind of can do this year. If that does get to be an issue in the NFL where he is not giving full effort, and if he's not getting the ball, he's just kind of, going through the motions, that's an issue, and it does hurt the entire team because, it's someone that you can tell is not getting the ball, and that just kind of, it affects defense, and then, it's just, it's an issue. It really is. But for right now, I'm going to kind of brush that aside. But I did want to highlight that just because I think that is one of the main reasons he did tend to fall in the 2024 NFL Draft. However, on the field, when he is getting the ball, and his athleticism is not in question whatsoever. He scored a 9.99 on the relative athletic score, which is, if you guys have not already heard about this or whatever it is, it's a score based from 1 to 10 that accounts for a player's height, weight, 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, vertical, broad jump, all that kind of stuff, and it gives a score from 1 to 10, and it's the relative athletic score. Obviously, A.D. Mitchell scored very, very well on this, 9.99 out of 10. Granted, he didn't have his agility testing done. Not sure why. I'm not sure if it just wasn't uploaded to this or if he just didn't have it done. I don't know. But regardless, unless he is like, incredibly, slow with his agility and not elusive whatsoever, I would assume if he had that tested, his score would not be much worse than this. He would probably still be in the high 9 point whatever. So, yeah, very, very good testing. His athleticism is not in question whatsoever. He's an amazing player. And again, I just want to highlight this and once again say that I do not use this to make or break a prospect. I just kind of like to highlight it because it is interesting. I know you guys like seeing this as well, so just throwing that out there again. But a huge focus of not only the Colts offense, but this specific video I'm doing is on Anthony Richardson and coming back from that shoulder injury. So let's go back to the 2023 NFL Draft, actually. He was a pretty raw prospect. He tested very, very well at the Combine. His physical attributes are not in question whatsoever. His arm strength is not in question whatsoever. It was more of his accuracies and footwork. He was not a very polished prospect, but he has the tools to be a very, very good quarterback in the NFL. Probably his ceiling is top 10 in my opinion, or maybe even, I'm not sure about top 5, but top 10 for sure is his ceiling, at least in my opinion, if he can put everything together. Now, again, he was an interesting prospect because at the time, the Panthers had the first overall pick, and some people kind of said, just go big, pick him. In my opinion, being a Panthers fan, and then even if I wasn't, I think in general, if you're the first pick in the draft and you need a quarterback, and there is a player labeled pro-ready and a player not pro-ready whatsoever but has the tools, you go with the safer option. You go with the guy can start day one. And ultimately they went with Bryce Young, who did not have a good rookie season. But I think even if they wouldn't have picked him, then I think Stroud was the next pick. I don't think Richardson, as a prospect, should have been taken number 1 all or should have been in that conversation. But number 4 is much different. You can get a very, very talented developmental quarterback that the Colts might have hit really big on, although unfortunately we didn't get to see a lot of his rookie season. However, whenever he did play, granted it is a very small sample size, he didn't seem to be as, raw of a prospect on the field. He seemed to put things together pretty quickly. So starting with that week 1 game in Jacksonville, they lost by 10, but he went 24 for 37, 223 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 reception, and 1 rushing touchdown as well. After that, it was Houston, where they won 31-20. He went 6 for 10, 56 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but had 2 rushing touchdowns in that game, where he also suffered a concussion, missed a week, then came back against the Rams in a 29-23 loss in overtime, where he went 11 for 25, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. Probably his best game, where he had basically 256 total yards with 3 total touchdowns to no turnovers in that game. And the Titans game, where he unfortunately got hurt and ended his season, where he was 9 for 12, 98 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and no rushing touchdowns either. But ultimately, and again, very small sample size, he had 7 total touchdowns, just over 700 total yards, with only 1 total turnover. And again, I've said this 3 times now, probably the 4th time now. It is a small sample size, but from what he showed, he was a bit more, I don't want to say polished as a player, but he did not appear to be as raw of a player as one would have expected for him to start day 1 based off the prospect he was. I think he honestly did not look too bad on his passes. Obviously, the arm strength, never in question. But again, as a runner, he was very good. He broke tackles. I think he was fairly accurate, more accurate than he was labeled. Again, 64%, 60% in the full games that he did play. Actually, no, sorry. 64% in the full game he played and 44% in the full game he played after that. So again, I expected it to be a bit of a rougher start to that season. That didn't really happen. So I think he has a big comeback year in place. And so again, despite the small sample size, assuming he can bounce back and start the season off fairly hot like he just did last year, this is the Colts depth chart for their offense as of right now. So Anthony Richardson is quarterback, Jonathan Taylor is running back, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and Adonai Mitchell are wide receivers, Jelani Woods tight end, Bernard Raymond is left tackle, Quentin Nelson left guard, center Ryan Kelly, right guard Will Fries, and right tackle Braden Smith. So looking at this, one of the bigger departures was Zach Moss, who left for the Bengals after last season. But other than that, as far as weapons go, it's all still kind of there. You could even argue they upgraded a bit by drafting A.D. Mitchell. Also, A.D. Adonai, same thing. And I've used both this video, but just clearing that up for anybody that somehow maybe didn't put that together. But Michael Pittman Jr. had a very solid year last year. I think he was quite underrated, actually, in a year where they lost their potential franchise quarterback with Gardner Minshew in there. He played pretty well, and the Colts put together not a terrible season after it seemed to be pretty disastrous after losing Richardson earlier that year. But so you have Michael Pittman Jr., you have Josh Downs returning off a very solid rookie year. I think he had over 700 yards receiving. You add Mitchell, Alec Pierce, by no means is like a elite wide receiver 1, but anything like that. But as a depth piece, I feel like that's honestly pretty solid. So he's there still too. After him, I think it falls off a bit as far as the depth at wide receiver. But again, that could be worse. Tight end, Jelani Woods and Kyle Granson, Molly Cox. That's a fairly deep tight end room, honestly. So I'm not too worried about that either. Looking at this, Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, Evan Hull. Again, they lost Zach Moss. Taylor is obviously, good. In the receiving game, he's not terrible. He's obviously a very good running back. I'm interested to see Trey Sermon with a lot of snaps, though. I think he will actually be relatively, I don't want to say productive, but I don't think he's going to be like useless either this year. So, you look at this and it's like, man, Richardson really has a lot of weapons on this offense to put together a pretty good season and stack up the wins, which also brings us to the schedule this year. The Colts, and it feels weird saying this, are now, they're in the AFC South, which is actually going to be a pretty good and very competitive division. And again, I'm not going to go through every single game here. That's going to be the more in-depth thing later on this offseason. The first episode will be coming out. It's not the Colts, but the first episode of that series will be out within the next week or so, and basically going on all offseason until the season starts. But looking at the schedule, you play Houston twice a year, who's one of the major threats in the entire AFC now. You got to play Jacksonville, who I think will bounce back pretty well. Last year, Lawrence, the numbers were undeniable before and after his injury. He struggled a lot and did not play what we've seen to be his best. I think they bounced back pretty nicely this year. The Titans, I think, are very boomer bust on offense. You have some pretty older weapons on that offense, but with a very young quarterback, so that should be pretty interesting. You also bring in Tony Pollard. So regardless, I think every single divisional game will be pretty competitive. And then, those out-of-division games like Buffalo, New York, Detroit, even maybe Chicago, Miami. The Colts, they don't have an easy schedule. I don't think they have a difficult schedule. You do have very winnable games like Denver in there. The Giants are in there. I would even say they could probably beat Minnesota, although that might be a bit more even. So again, I wouldn't say it's a very tough schedule, but it's not a free one by any means either. And because this division is probably going to be so close, every game is going to matter. And Richardson, in his first year back, is going to be in a very tight race for the top of the AFC South. And again, this video is supposed to be relatively brief and just focus on the offense. It doesn't tell the whole, other side of the story as far as defense goes. But for this offense, if Richardson is really able to put it together, I think this can be, honestly, a very, very good offense. Assuming Mitchell is, the talent he can be, and he doesn't kind of, become unmotivated and not put up numbers that he's capable of probably putting up if he can stay focused and give full effort. And to be honest, again, I'm not really letting that opinion of him sway me right now. I think as a player, he could become very quickly wide receiver 2, even over Josh Downs. Which is saying something because Josh Downs had a very solid rookie season as well. He's not a bad receiver. So to me, it's like, yes, there isn't a ton to go off of. But what was shown, I think, can definitely be built off of because he showed, he wasn't as raw that people thought he was. He very quickly in that first game, he was putting numbers up. I'm not going to lie. 223 passing yards from a guy that was seen as kind of an inaccurate passer and a big question mark. I think that's an exceptional start to the season. And had he stayed healthy, these numbers probably would have been much better at the start of the season. Even if he did go down in that Titans game, I would have loved to see him play a full game against Houston because he had 2 rushing touchdowns in I think the first half before he even got hurt and had that concussion. So I'm excited to see him in year 2. I'm fully on board, to be honest with you. I think he's going to have a major comeback season. I think the Colts are actually, in my opinion, one of the more underrated teams going into the 2024 NFL season. So I'm excited to do a full video kind of breakdown on their team as a whole, including the defense and all. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I am very excited for Anthony Richardson, and if you guys are too, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, going over all these NFL teams, ranking players, teams, and all that kind of stuff. I also do Madden videos where we do gameplays and pack openings, and I will also be doing videos in the college football game as well come July. So it's all football content on the channel one way or another. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so thank you guys for all the support. I do really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.